Let's talk about one of life's great mysteries. Why do some things just feel wildly unfair? You know what I mean. You spend an hour crafting the perfect email for a client, warm, professional, clever sign-off, and in response, crickets. And then your coworker sends a one line with a typo and the client responds in all caps, amazing. Or your neighbor's dog is a walking example of obedience while yours treats every command like a vague suggestion. Or you pay extra for priority shipping, yet your package still shows up a week late. Meanwhile, your friend picks the free option and gets their order the next day. And let's not even start on the coworker who's late every day but somehow gets promoted for initiative. And then there's the heavier stuff. You watch someone take the fall for a mess they didn't make. You hear some gossip about someone, and even though it's not true, that person suffers the fallout anyway. A social media influencer racks up millions of dollars posting divisive opinions, while a foster parent quietly holds it all together and can barely afford a weekend off. There's something in us that recoils at this imbalance. It doesn't sit right. We ache for justice, for someone to step in and say, that's enough, to make things right. We want a world that makes sense, one where good is rewarded, evil is confronted, and mercy isn't mistaken for weakness. Whether we're talking about annoying double standards or deep systemic pain, the truth is that we all long for justice, or, put a different way, fairness. But if we're honest, most of us only want fairness when it benefits us. We want justice until we're the ones in the hot seat. I mean, think about it. When someone else misses a deadline at work or violates a policy, we are quick to say, that's the rule, they knew the consequences. But when we're the ones who slip up, the story shifts. We say, oh, it was a misunderstanding. I've been under a lot of pressure. Can we just talk about it? It's the same dynamic in everyday life. If someone cuts you off in traffic, you want them pulled over immediately, fined, ticketed, made an example of. But when you accidentally miss a turn signal, well, surely the other drivers will understand you were distracted by the GPS or had a kid yelling in the back seat. It's not that you're against justice. You're just for mercy when it's your mistake. This tension shows up all over our lives. We hold people to a standard, but we're always hoping for flexibility when it's our turn. When someone else messes up, we want justice. But when we mess up, we want mercy. So let's clarify what we're really talking about here. Justice is getting exactly what you deserve. You make a decision and you face the consequences, good or bad. Mercy, on the other hand, is when you don't get what you deserve. It's when someone chooses grace over punishment. And while we may admire that in theory, it gets tricky when we're on the receiving or giving end of that mercy. We want justice until we're the one who needs mercy. We want people to pay for what they did until we're the ones who messed up. So here's a big question. What if God is both completely just and completely merciful at the same time? What if he punishes evil and still protects people? What if he confronts injustice and still offers compassion? That would be different, right? That would be a God worth paying attention to. And that's exactly what we see in the account we're going to look at today. This part of Moses' story is intense. God's people, the Israelites, had been held captive in Egypt for years, beaten, dehumanized, their baby boys murdered, forgotten by the world, but not by God. He saw every bit of it and he didn't look away. We pick up this part of the story in chapter 8. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go back to Pharaoh and announce to him, 'This is what the Lord says. Let my people go so they can worship me.'" It's important to understand just what Pharaoh was. He wasn't just some ruler. He was the king of Egypt, the most powerful man in the world at the time. Think emperor, CEO, and ultimate dictator all rolled into one. He had complete control. So when God told Moses to confront Pharaoh, this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. This was like walking into a palace and demanding the release of an entire nation. No backup, no army, just Moses and the presence of God. And Pharaoh, he wasn't just saying no to Moses, he was saying no to God. Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." If we're honest, this isn't much different than the questions we ask sometimes. Who is the Lord? What does he mean to my life? Why should I follow him? Is he relevant to what I'm facing? Ultimately, God gave Pharaoh chance after chance to comply. One plague at a time, a warning, then consequences. plague after plague rained down, 10 in total. Water turned to blood. Epic swarms of frogs, gnats, and flies, livestock disease, boils, hail, locusts, complete darkness. And in between each one, we're told something critical. Pharaoh hardened his heart and would not listen. Pharaoh's heart was unyielding, and Pharaoh sinned again. He and his officials hardened their hearts. Pharaoh was clinging to pride, even as his nation suffered. Then came the final plague, the death of every firstborn in the kingdom. It's devastating. It's personal. It's the final act of judgment for years, maybe even centuries of injustice. But even then, in the middle of that judgment, God offered mercy. He told Moses, "Take some of the blood of a lamb and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses. When I see the blood, I will pass over you." And even at this stage of events, we see a God who's both just and merciful. On one hand, God was executing restorative justice for what the Egyptians had done to the Israelites for years. On the other hand, he was offering mercy to anyone humble enough to trust him. That's what the Passover was. Cover your doorpost with blood, and I will extend mercy to you. I will save you. Whoever followed the instruction would be saved. Isn't that amazing? God holds evil accountable and still makes a way for people to be saved. And that's because only God is fully just and fully merciful. This wasn't favoritism. This was restorative justice and radical mercy side by side. God was saying, I will hold evil accountable, but I will give you a way to be covered. Pharaoh dug in his heels, pride, control, resistance, and it cost him everything. But those who trusted God and humbled themselves, they were covered. They were saved. They were free. This whole moment was a shadow of something greater, because centuries later, God would once again confront evil. And once again, he would offer blood as covering. But this time, it was the blood of his son. The night before Jesus went to the cross, he gathered his disciples to celebrate Passover, the very moment we've been talking about. And on the heels of remembering that lamb's blood once saved God's people from death, Jesus became the true Passover lamb, offering his life to save us from sin and separation. And just so we're clear, sin is anything that goes against God and his ways. It's the selfishness, pride, and hurtful choices that create distance between us and the life God designed us for. This is what the Apostle Paul wrote. God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of his blood to be received by faith. The cross is the clearest picture of restorative justice and redeeming mercy in one moment. On one hand, restorative justice was carried out. Sin was punished. On the other hand, redeeming mercy was offered. We didn't have to take the punishment. Jesus took it for us. That's justice and mercy colliding in the most powerful way possible. It wasn't fair. It was better than fair. It was grace. So if you're wondering if God cares about all the bad stuff in the world, I assure you, he does. He gave up his life for it. And if you wonder if you've done too much wrong for him to forgive you, he hasn't. He gave up his life out of his love for you and his desire to forgive you. Only God is fully just and fully merciful. And that's why the cross changes everything for you and for me. God is so big that he can hold justice and mercy at the same time. So how do we respond to a God who is both completely just and completely merciful? Well, let's consider two big questions. First, where do you need to seek or stand for justice? When God called Moses, he didn't just ask him to believe something, he asked him to do something, to confront oppression, to lead people toward freedom. That same call still echoes today, not in the same way, but with the same heart. So where in your world do you need to show up with courage and conviction? Maybe it looks like having a hard conversation when something unethical is happening in your workplace, refusing to stay silent when a joke or a comment or policy dehumanizes someone else, coming alongside a friend or coworker who feels overlooked, misunderstood, or isolated, using your influence at work or in your family, in your community to lift up those who have been pushed down, volunteering or donating toward causes that serve vulnerable populations, children in the foster system, families facing housing insecurity, victims of trafficking, or the chronically unseen. Reading and listening well, educating yourself about injustice, and resisting the urge to tune it out just because it's uncomfortable. Justice doesn't mean doing everything, but it does mean doing something. It's about using what you've been given, your voice, your resources, your influence, for the good of others, especially when it costs you something. And then, where do you need to show mercy? If justice is about standing up for what's right, then mercy is about laying down your right, especially the right to get even. Mercy is refusing to define someone by their worst moment. It's choosing grace over grudge. It's remembering that God didn't wait for you to clean up your mess before offering you love. So who in your life needs mercy right now? Maybe it's a spouse who disappointed you, not dramatically, but repeatedly. A friend whose absence hurt more than they realized. A colleague who has made everything harder, but is clearly carrying more than they let on. A parent whose brokenness impacted your childhood. A grown child who's struggling and making choices you can't control. Or maybe it's you. Maybe you're still carrying a weight that mercy would release. Shame, perfectionism, the unrelenting replay of what you should have done differently. Mercy begins with receiving. When you've experienced the undeserved kindness of God, you become the kind of person who can offer it, even when it's hard, even when it's costly. We've called this series Uncharted because following God isn't about staying on a predictable path. It's about stepping into territory that will often feel risky, vulnerable, and unknown. That's where real growth happens. Justice and mercy, that's uncharted territory. Most of us lean hard one way or the other, but God invites us to do something we can't do on our own, hold both. So here's the challenge. Will you let God lead you through the uncharted path of grace, where He makes things right and makes us new? Will you trust His justice even when it feels slow? Will you receive His mercy even when you feel unworthy? Will you extend both to others even when it's hard? That's the kind of life worth living. That's the kind of God worth following, because only God is fully just, only God is fully merciful, and only God can lead you through the uncharted places with both truth and grace. So let's follow Him there.